Good afternoon. Thank you, Zoya, Yusuf, Minal, and the entire ART Mumbai team for this opportunity. Congratulations on the third edition. It's gone from strength to strength. We've been proud and happy to be a collaborator through this journey, through the speakers' forums. Middle Eastern cultural corridors, deconstructing the rules of art engagement. Building on yesterday's keynote session on the shifting the axis of influence, a study at the University of Lucerne in Switzerland titled Cultural Flagships, Pathways, Practices, Politics of a Global Urban Type reveals a fascinating thread. The global center of cultural influence is moving eastwards. Previously dominated with cities like Paris and New York, are giving way to rising Asian metropolises, particularly China and the Gulf region. Vast sums are being invested into cultural infrastructure, while many of these institutions are still in the process of building collections and identities, unlike the older Western museums that rely on centuries of accumulation. For a long time, the Arabian Peninsula of the Gulf region was often imagined as a consumer of global culture rather than a producer. Today, the narrative has changed. The region is no longer a spectator, but the co-author of global culture, not just funding it, but shifting the center of gravity. The region's cultural capital and soft power now drives domestic growth and elevates the voice on a world stage. Before inviting our panelists to the stage, I'm going to share a brief overview of the region and some key projects in which they may have been or are currently involved with. We'll start with the United Arab Emirates. Abu Dhabi, Saadiyat Island, often called Island of Enlightenment, is a world-class cultural district. Home to the Louvre Abu Dhabi, opening end of the month, the National History Museum, end of the year, the National Plazaid, the National Museum, and the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi, slated to open in 2 years. Designated in 2021 as the UNESCO City of Music, in 26, Abu Dhabi is slated to host the Phrase Abu Dhabi and the Manhar Abu Dhabi, a public light art exhibition. To tell us more, we have with us Shafeena Yusuf, founder and executive director of Right Art Initiative, Rajiv Gopinadh, temporary exhibitions and special project manager at the Louvre Abu Dhabi. According to Creative Dubai 2024 Impact Report, Dubai's creative economy has contributed 2.1 billion AED to its GDP in 2022, employs 175,000 people, attracted nearly 900 foreign investment projects in 23, anchored by Art Dubai, Al Sarkar Avenue, Art Jamil, Design District, and the Museum of Future. Continued investment in cultural infrastructure includes a Dubai Museum of Art, DUMA, floating above the water on the Dubai Creek, designed by world-renowned Japanese architect Tadao Ando. To tell us more about this, we will be joined by Sasha Altaf, director of Ishara Art Foundation, housed in the vibrant Al Sarkar Avenue. Sharjah continues to anchor the region's contemporary art scene with the Sharjah Art Foundation, the Sharjah Biennale, and the Brazil Art Foundation that actually opened a wonderful collaborative show yesterday at the CSMBS. A new dedicated photography gallery and Al Majhar Park, an artist-led public art space. Qatar aims to grow its tourism contribution to GDP by 12% by 2030 and attract 6 million visitors annually. Doha is part of the UNESCO's Creative Cities Network, home to Mathaf, the Museum of Modern Art, the National Museum of Qatar, the Museum of Islamic Art, Souk Waqif. Art Basel is slated to launch in 2026. Reaffirming the region's cultural ties to South Asia, the Qatar Foundation in 28 is opening the La Wa Qalam, the M.F. Hussain Museum. Visit Qatar has and our Bombay's very own NMACC launched a year-long partnership to promote cultural exchange. And as we heard yesterday from the iconic Kiran Nadar Museum of Art, is partnering with the Qatar royal family to present a film on Amrita Shergar, to be directed by the new mayor of New York City's other Mira Nair. Kiran Nadar Museum of Art also presented a unique immersive exhibition, The Rooted Nomad, M.F. Hussain's last month at the Qatar Museum. Part of the Evolution Nation, an 18-month initiative marking its 50-year cultural journey and sustained dialogue with India. Saudi, its Vision 2030 agenda plans to expand the cultural sector to 3% of its GDP, equivalent to 48 billion US dollars. Employment in the cultural sector has increased by 318% since 2018, home to the Diraya Contemporary Arts Biennale, the New Riyadh, the Dynamic Jacks District, Team Labs Phenomena of Riyadh, Art Jamil, the launch of Riyadh University of the Arts, and auction houses, several auction houses. I believe Sotheby's has just opened up there. Beyond the capital, projects in Desert X Alula merges heritage, technology, and landscape into powerful expressions of modernity. And to tell us more, we have Head of Arts and Creative Industry of Alula, an independent curator, Arnaud Morand. As we open today's conversation, I'd like to address how are these cultural corridors moving beyond spectacles of mega events to building ecosystems that last? In what way can they generate enduring cultural and economic value? And how are they reshaping the language of soft power? Our distinguished panelists today, who represent institutions, initiatives, and at the heart of transformation, will help us explore these questions. So please join me in welcoming Arnaud Morand, Sasha Altaf, Rajiv Gopinadh, and Shafeena Yusuf Ali. Thank you all for joining us here this afternoon. I'm very excited to be in conversation with this stellar panel. I'm going to start with Arnaud. Thank you for being here. We've tried to make this happen a couple of times, and you took the trouble to stop by on your literally drop in from Japan on the way back to Abu Dhabi. Your experience in this region is incredible. From launching the Louvre to transfer the work you've done at Alula, a place which I had a pleasure of visiting in 2020. How have you seen these projects and programs across this region evolve to shape what has become a truly vibrant cultural hub, in a way, a new mecca of arts and culture? And tell us about some of the new initiatives we can look forward to in 26.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad we managed this time. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for hosting it, ART MUMBAI, Avid Learning. Thank you personally, Asad, for your warm welcome. So regarding Alula, maybe as a quick reminder, it's a very large scale, as you presented, development project that is not just arts and culture, but it's also about developing a region touristically, to also manage the archaeological sites in terms of heritage. So it's really about building a destination and developing an existing region and city. It's part of a larger scale initiative developed by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is Vision 2030, which essentially rely on diversifying the economy, modernizing the country. It's in one of the flagship projects you quoted some other that are not necessarily arts and culture, but more development like Neom, Amala, Red Sea, Qiddiya, etc. But for Alula specifically, I think it's really one of the cornerstone of the development of art and raising heritage in the kingdom, in a region that is as vast as Belgium, with 35,000 inhabitants. So it is pretty empty. We call it the Living Museum, but it's a living museum to be, because obviously we're starting, and if it was already finished, I think it would be a bad project, because we need to take time. We need to listen to the land. We're on an archaeological site of pre-Islamic civilization. So opening museum too fast and doing collection is always a bad sign for me. It started officially in 2017 with the development and creation of the Royal Commission of Alula, which is a government entity that is in charge of developing the project, but it also has a municipal authority on the land, which is necessary to make things happen. As for me, I joined this initiative in 2018 as part of a French organization. So they signed a bilateral agreement with the French government, just like we did for the Louvre Abu Dhabi 10 years before, quite successfully, to accompany the Saudi government on the development of the project in all the realm of expertise. So that goes from art to heritage to tourism to agriculture, building roads, security, so far, so forth. So that's it for the factual boring stage. Now you ask about the 2020 things to come. So you want to have exclusive information that I'm not allowed to share with you today. So I will try to speak cryptically. So right now we just opened an exhibition in Tokyo, as you said, which shows the result of hosting more than 70 artists in the desert of Alaula for research and production projects. All disciplines, so from sculpture to photography. I see Jai Sharma right here, who is an alumni of the residency that I'm very happy to see today, which is showing in Tokyo the result of his research and production and every pieces we're doing to feed the collection effort of the future museums. Now, in 2026 in January, we're opening a new art festival. I hope that you can come. Which is essentially a new version of Desert X that you talked about, which is a land art project, ephemeral land art project, that is also a way for us to prepare to our permanent land art project that we will start to produce very soon with artists like James Turrell, Michael Heiser, Agnes Dennis, Ahmed Mata, and Manal Al-Dawayan. We are also going to open a new program on design and architecture that will be shown first in Alaula and then developed further for Salone del Mobile in Milan and in Paris, and many other things that I will develop further in the talk.
Well, thank you for that. We promise not to share this information. The Ishara Art Foundation was founded in 2019 as a non-profit dedicated to presenting contemporary art of Southern Asia. Your curatorial practice spans 20 years, and I keep going back to the Rashid Rana show I saw last year in Al Sarkar, which was quite remarkable. But however, you're a new resident to the area. So given your extensive background, previously from an outsider, now as an insider, how have you seen these cultural corridors evolve? And how I'll give you a part 2 now, or do you want me to wait? All right. And how has Ishara influenced the way regional audiences engage with South Asian art and the diaspora?
Okay, so I'll do part 1. As I'm new to the region, it's very, very different for me when we were talking about it because they've all been more involved than I have. But what I do find, it's... okay, what was the first question?
You've been visiting the area, right? Forever.
No, that's not.
So that Rashid Rana show was a...
No, my first show was with Shiba Chachi.
Okay.
And that was in 2024. And so 2023, actually. So I've been in and out, but it was with Walt. And then I've just joined recently as a Feb of this year with the Ishara Art Foundation. So thank you for getting us onto this panel and this dialogue, because I think I'm going to learn a lot in the process. I forgot what was the first question.
So how have you seen the region change? I mean, just over the years, or 2 years you've been there, even then it's changed a lot, right?
It's changed. I think since in the last 2 years, definitely there's been a change. But I mean, somebody who's been the outsider coming in, I'm quite fascinated because there's a different kind of approach to art making, thinking, processes, which did not kind of something that was new to me prior to being in the States for 25 years and then coming to India in and out. Censorship is an issue that I don't think I had ever faced in that sense when we were in the States or when we were in India also. I mean, for sense, examples were extreme, but in general, we've kind of been very liberal in our art practices. So I do find initially it was quite interesting when I wanted to do a Shiva Chachi show and I couldn't raise feminist issues or I couldn't talk about sexuality openly. Which I think in bits and pieces, I don't know if you align with concerns, but I do feel over a period of time that has shifted ground. I do find the overall energy, it's a very collaborative energy, which I find very fascinating in the UAE, unlike India or the West. When I say collaborative, like if I speak about Dubai, I'm talking about the Al Sarkar area. I'm talking about all of us who are within the Al Sarkar area foundations. We're talking about Jameel. We're talking about ART Dubai, now Abu Dhabi. Yes, there is a kind of hierarchy. I understand Abu Dhabi supersedes us, which I refuse to accept. I mean, there is a different kind of hierarchy in place. But in general, I find there is a kind of collaborative energy which is very special. There's a constant ecosystem where there's a dialogue taking place, which is not hierarchical. I find that very interesting. And I think where Ishara Art Foundation comes in, it was established in 2019. And it's a space which I think focuses, of course, primarily on contemporary South Asian art. But we also are creating very research-based exhibitions. Our curatorial bend is more towards and leans more towards a kind of sustaining system of creating an ecosystem in which critical thought, debate, thinking, everything is more collective, which I find very important. Right, yeah.
And what are some of the projects you're working on? I mean, the last show we saw was Shilpa with the...
The last show, of course, Shilpa was very interesting because it actually talked about crossing borders and, how do we negotiate borders in a time like this. Currently, the word global interconnectedness kicks in because we're actually aligning ourselves with Tripicte. So it's one of the largest photography exhibitions that I've come to us straight from the V&A in England. Very interesting because I get this question very often as to why are we doing a pre-Pictet exhibition. But the reality is you're dealing across borders again. So you're kind of raising issues, and Storm, which is their theme at this point, is not a literal storm. It's about what's happening politically, socially, economically. So those are the questions. So its idea is to create, again, a very dynamic space for conversation.
And this idea of censorship will come there. But I'm going to come back to that as my follow-up question to you. Rajiv, you've had over 15 years of experience. You've been involved with the Qatar Museum, with Mata, with Noor Riyadh, Desert X, and now with the Louvre, with special projects. Given your extensive background in the region, how have you seen the rules of art engagement change?
Well, first of all, wonderful to be here. Thank you, Asad, for having me on the panel. And I feel like sitting with Shafeena, we're Team Abu Dhabi over here.
I tried to separate them, it didn't work.
So there is this growing awareness and appreciation, of course. It's this upward trend and, all the hype and so much investment to bring people or art to the people. But that's where it gets a little blurry because I feel like the museums, we're in this competition with this idea of edutainment. It's very much about drone shows and the light arts. And that's where, yes, you could appreciate the scale and the materiality and have all this art formalism. But ultimately, for the public, it's just this wow factor, like a fireworks display, And then that sort of continues even within the Saadiyat Cultural District. You showed that slide where down the road from the Louvre, we've just earlier this year, it opened Team Lab, which is this incredible Japanese art collective. And you have this incredible building with these super sensorial overload of installations of rooms. And, there is art in that, but also, what is the effect really? What you take away? Where's the context? Is it just, light and sound? So this trickles into the museum sphere because we have to compete with that. In our permanent galleries, we keep the rigor, but we have a museum app. Kids can go on there and do a treasure hunt, and they have a digital, interpretation of our collection. And our forum, there's a virtual reality experience that's on where you're wearing a VR headset and you do a time travel through our collection. In the exhibitions that I manage and oversee, we had the budgets. We do push the envelope. We've done holograms. We've done green screen. We've done AI. Of course, they're tablets. Of course, they're interactive maps. So all of this is difficult to navigate. But this is what the audience expects now. They expect to come in and have immersive spaces and be entertained.
Right. I mean, and the fireworks. I was at the Qatar Museum opening where they opened in 2019 or whenever it was, and the fireworks were pretty incredible and everything else to go with it. But now just a question coming back.
But sorry, I just wanted to add to that. There is that, but on the other side, the other range, and talking about how it's evolved. 15 years ago when I was in Qatar, I mean, the locals, for them, it was, if they were working in Qatar museums, it was a government job. They were working in HR or admin or finance or what have you. And now I think in the region, it's really bearing fruit, the vision and the capacity building, because really, I mean, the crop that's coming out now, especially the Emiratis, the women, they're doing the scientific roles. They're curators, they're registrars, they're preventive, they're conservators. Even in our state-of-the-art lab, they're doing material sciences. And, it's really incredible to see. And even adjacent to that, design, fashion, co-working spaces, fab labs. And what I'm trying to get to is these particular practitioners, they're the new audience. I mean, now they're savvy. They're involved in this art making.
Just to add to that, how is the Louvre influenced the way regional audiences engage with South Asian art?
So the tagline for Louvre Abu Dhabi is it's the Museum of Universal Narrative. And it sounds very obvious. Why don't all museums do this? I mean, it's basically all the creative output throughout the world from all regions are on an equal footing. So our permanent galleries are chronological from prehistory to modern. And the reason why it's so unique and for us to have done it is because existing museums are so invested in the silos and the wings and the barriers they have between each civilization or who influenced what or who came first. But we've kind of moved away from that. And of South Asian is very much in that conversation, from Chola bronzes to manuscripts to miniatures. It's all in conversation with the output from the region of that time in that wing or gallery.
Wonderful. Thank you. Shafeena, thank you for joining us. I know you've made a gallant effort to stop by literally for 4 hours in Mumbai. But, you hold multiple master's degrees that have shaped your distinct approach to blending artistic vision and strategic business acumen. A recipient of many, many awards, so luckily we don't have to read the bios, but it's all on the website. You launched RAI in 2023 as a culmination of your lifelong mission. That must have been a very short mission life, but you're so young and so successful to champion the arts. So, how do you view... See, you're actually the best person to answer this question I've asked everyone, because you're actually you born there, brought up there. You're actually a local. How have you seen this creative landscape evolve?
So I am an OG Abu Dhabian. I was born and brought up in Abu Dhabi. And if you have ever been to Abu Dhabi in the 80s or the 90s, if you see things like, for example, the volcano fountain, or, nothing from when you cross from Abu Dhabi to the World Trade Center in Dubai, there was nothing. There was no Sheikh Zayed Road. There was no, there was one, I think a Hard Rock cafe at some point or the other, which is where, I think when I used to go to US and on the way to Abu Dhabi, we would stop by to hang out with friends. But that was what Abu Dhabi and the UAE was essentially to what it is today, when there was no Al Circle, there was no museums, there was no Sadiyat, there were no islands. And to today, it has been astronomical. The changes from the economy, social, cultural, there's so many changes to what UAE wants to become. And in very much the sense, I think for Abu Dhabi, it was a very conscious decision to change in this way. And even when, for example, Dubai was growing in the speed that it did, Abu Dhabi was very conscious on how they want to do things and why they want to do things that they want to do. So I think the Louvre, the Sadiyat, the cultural district, everything was a conscious decision for them when they removed a lot of the cultural landmarks that were there. For example, like the fountain volcano, which anyone who has been to Abu Dhabi will know what I'm talking about. They are now trying to revive those in the sense, Many of the buildings in Abu Dhabi are considered heritage buildings now that you can't break down. But for Rai, I think what I was trying to do is I sit in a very unique perspective. There is 13% of the entire UAE that has the local population. 30% of the country are Indians. More than 13% are Pakistanis. And then there's, the Bangladeshis, the Indonesians, the Filipinos. There are all of these populations. And I look at, I think, the population from that perspective of, yes, we cater to these incredible Emiratis and the local population and the Emirati identity but how do we put them in conversation with the artists, contemporary artists from the rest of the world, and have them converse with each other? We put, for example, Sayan Dairit, who's an incredible Filipino artist who works in Berlin, in conversation with Wambui Kamuro, who is a artist from Africa, with I think Ravi Agarwal, who's obviously an incredible Indian artist, and put them in conversation talking about imperial silhouettes, which is the remnants of imperialism that we live with today. So these kind of, I think, conversations, when we put them in conversation with each other, the Filipino community comes in and sees not just Sayan Dairit, who is someone from their country and identity, but also someone like Ravi Agarwal, someone like Wambui Kumar, like all of these, Kara Walker. So they're seeing these kind of, I think, conversations that they can identify in some way, but also be inspired by, and have not just their fellow countrymen being spoken about, but also converse with other countrymen who lived and work in Abu Dhabi and identify with them in some way as well.
Thank you for that. I'm going to come back to some of the festivals you're organizing and some of your programming. Arnaud, I'm going to go back to you. The Alula Festival programming includes the Wadi Alfan, Design Space Alula, Alula Arts Festival. These are large, foreground, multi-sensory, site-specific works that respond directly to the region's landscape and cultural heritage. So when commissioning such large or site-specific works, how do you design programs that resonate authentically with the local communities and also are relevant to an international audience?
And how long do we have?
Actually, we've got to go quick now. We did half an hour, one round.
Okay.
2 minutes.
So I think the first question that you're raising is, what kind of tension and how could you curate and develop programming infrastructure that are relevant to the project, but also to the place, to its community, to its story, etc. So for me, it's always about context, and anything that you try to apply from outside, especially in a project like Alula, with everything is about creating from the ground up and not just trying to import some international model or exhibition of programming. It is crucial. As you quite beautifully said in the introduction, you asked the question of living in some sort of post-Western reality. Well, if we do, and if we work contextually, then we have to do things differently. Otherwise, once again, we'll fail. There is one first point for Alula, which is the dialogue, sometimes friction, between heritage, preservation, and a project that is looking towards the future, in terms of urban planning, in terms of contemporary arts, in terms of programming. Of course, it could be seen as a fruitful conversation. It is always put down like this in communications, etc. But it also raised some questions. And one who develops such a large-scale project that are as the thresholds of utopia, if not Curatorial, needs to ask this question, because you can easily take the wrong direction. I think one of a good way to do this and to address this problem, even if it's not a perfect solution, is also to associate other brains, other type of intelligence, not just urban planners, architects, specialists of creating a city or touristing infrastructure, is also to host artists all the time. Because even if you don't have infrastructure museum ready, if you have artists who are seeing things differently that you would do, they're seeing things that we don't necessarily see, they can steer us in the good direction. They could help us with their own critical eye through art to go in the right direction. In a country where direct criticism, should it be politically, economically, is difficult still, Saudi Arabia, artists and their vision and their proposition through concept or not, for me is very important. Then obviously, when it comes to friction between heritage and innovation and a city looking towards the future, you have all of the factual elements to control tourism and the flux. So don't overdo tourism, don't do massive hotels, limit the number of keys. Some sites need to be not accessible. It's normal. Some are protected. Should there be natural reserve? Should there be heritage sites where archaeologists need to do their work? So not everything is about tourism. Then there's always another way to look at it as well. There's a tension between heritage and the future and etc. But there is also a beautiful hybridity between this millennial past and contemporary art, if I can say. So in a way, you're offering historical deep roots to new ambitions looking toward the future, and artists are the vehicle for that because they create this sort of palimpsest with elements of millennial history, old history, remnants of pre-Islamic civilization, and reflection on where we could go, potential future. Some of them are dystopic, some of them are successful. Only the time and years will say it. But yes, for me, that's the question I would say. And then about community, if I have another minute. Once again, we go back to the context. If you want to do something relevant, you cannot import a model that worked somewhere else or a few years ago. You need to contextualize your action. I'm going to take an example. We're doing a contemporary art museum that we're opening in 4 years in partnership with the Centre Pompidou. I insist on this term, in partnership with the Centre Pompidou, because this is not a Centre Pompidou with the name Centre Pompidou that we're opening in the desert. This is a name. This is a museum yet to be named. It's a partnership with an international institution with a great collection. But we open the possibility to work with other institutions that are not necessarily French, which is super important, to do exhibition or research project or commission with other partners. And that's a way to do it contextually as well.
So no pressure for the Vision 2030 and, being the cultural anchor. Now I'm going to go to Sasha right now, not letting him respond. Building a sustainable art scene depends on multiple stakeholders, including collectors, state support. From a curatorial viewpoint, what steps should institutions take to build this robust arts ecosystem? But I'm going to go back to something you told me when we were chatting, and I liked it and I noted it down. You said that foundations you equate to as catalysts, biennales are laboratories, and museums are learning spaces. So how would you define the role of Al Sarkar, Amity? Because I love that. I think that face is very vibrant, great energy. So two-part question.
I think it's Al Sarkar, the avenue by itself kind of plays a very seminal role in what the space we're in, especially for Ishara Art Foundation. It's like a microcosm in one way, where you kind of have galleries, design studios, photography, you have beautiful film theater. So it's a very similar feeling like Bulabai Desai Road in one way. So it kind of, the previous conversation that we were listening in on, I thought it was so relevant because the desire is to go back to that same ecosystem. I think the role that institutions play, we are literally the catalyst. And I really believe Biennales become laboratories because that's the time you're trying to figure things out and see which artist puts it against what's the conversation, where's the process going. I think museums, of course, they're learning spaces. Earlier this morning I was talking to Navjot and she said, it's these learning spaces are so essential because there's a way of, in a museum, you go back to the past and you're also coming into the present, and there is a desire for the future. So you play a very vital role because, there is a kind of historicizing moments in time. So I think in terms of sustainability, I really believe that building ecosystems that extend beyond the market is very, very essential. How does one go about bringing these shifts? I think personally, a long-term funding for research and production. What I mean is where artists need time, they need space to reflect. And if they had support systems and we could do smaller grants for them, or we can have residency programs, or have spaces like the one in Alibag, or the spaces like Bulabai Desai. Use those as creating a network, where we can actually have artists get more involved.
Or go to the desert.
Or go to the desert. Or go to Ishara House, which I'm going to come to. I see Riyadh in the list. So we're going to add to that.
Thank you for that. Rajiv, the Louvre has evolved into this major cultural hub, right? 1.42 million visitors in 24. You had 45,000 students and teachers in 23. Now, from being the only cool kid on the block, you're going to have 3 other museums opening out in your neighborhood. So how is the Louvre focusing its programming and special projects to continue this audience engagement? You mentioned a lot of tech-forward strategies, which is, it's not the way forward, it is the way at the moment. And also, what steps can you do for cultural tourism? Because, everybody goes to Abu Dhabi, goes and sees the Louvre, goes and sees the Grand Mosque. Now, will I go back just to Abu Dhabi again for the Louvre or just for Coldplay?
So this is the speed round, so I'll be quick. So it's a lot of phenomenal work by our education and culture programming and outreach teams. Absolutely, we have to be in sync with ADEC, which is the Abu Dhabi Education and Knowledge Ministry. There's a lot of work that happens on lesson plans, learning resources. We at the beginning of the school year, we invite all the teachers in as per many schools as possible and really showcase, what's possible in our galleries, and then include them as stakeholders in, of course, designing the school visits. So generally, we're closed on Mondays for maintenance and so on, but we do have certain Mondays where schools take over the museum. And then it's wonderful. Hundreds of kids, depending on the school and the age group, but in the galleries, they do all these interventions in dialogue with the works. They've inspired to do theater, dance, music in the galleries. So it's quite something. In terms of tourism, yes, everybody wants that Instagram moment under the dome. And really, even at the time that I've been there, it's incredible. You don't know what will go viral. I think maybe it's the Chinese with the Weibo app or something, as a colleague was telling me. But suddenly it became that there was an informal queue that we now regulate, but everybody lines up to take this one photo on this platform as a catwalk, because at a certain angle, you somehow have all the elements of the museum, the water, the platform, the dome, and this VIP entrance in the back, so people don't pass to ruin your shot. So that also becomes a sort of performance to see every day the crowds, going and doing this ritual. But in terms of repeat, it's a lot of what we do after the galleries close, Louvre Late. We do, film screenings. There's a lot happening in terms of having all kinds of ceremonies, events, and so on, or try to bring in, big name DJs that are, vibing or, in theme with whatever exhibitions we have on at the time.
Wow, thank you for that. I'll be back though. Rai has become known for opening pathways for artists from across the world, not just South Asia. So tell us a little bit about Rai's programming, and how does this translate into real professional and artistic growth for your artists? But when you're telling us about programming, tell me about the Imaginary Museum also.
So, I wanted to, when I came on this panel, when I was coming on this panel, I was really thinking about what to tell you about Rai. And Rai is, I think, in that sense, very much rooted in Abu Dhabi. But we're trying to build these cultural bridges to and from Abu Dhabi, from across the world, for the diaspora that lives in the UAE. And for me, this sort of a corridor is something that allows artists from what I call the majority world to come and show and think and make in the UAE and across borders without, I think, a Euro-American framework. How do you really kind of be rooted in your essence without having to oversimplify it? And for me, I really think about what does this mean for the artists that come and either work with us or show their work with us in Abu Dhabi. And for me, I think what it means is for someone from Abu Dhabi to, for example, show and can feel intellectually and emotionally at home in a place like, for example, Kochi, but also an artist from India can kind of still show in Abu Dhabi without having to kind of talk away their complexities or having to explain their context. And that's what I think RAI is trying to do as an organization. In essence, like the current exhibition, for example, that we're having called the Imaginary Museum, is talking about three things essentially. It's about fiction, memory, and material. And we have artists like, for example, Indu Anthony, who actually used to live in Dubai. And what she's done is basically taken blueprints of the various apartments that she lived in Dubai. And as an expat kid, you move houses in UAE a lot. And she took those blueprints and actually had pictures from when she used to live in that house within those blueprints and stitched on her hair into those images, leaving kind of, I think, remnants of herself within it. And another thing that she actually, I think, showed at the space, I'm not sure if you can see them because the medium is scent. She basically had shown distilled petrichor, which is the smell of rain. We actually had someone from the audience actually cry because what she actually remembered from that piece was when her father used to go back to India on his every 2-year break, because that's what happens in the UAE. You have a holiday every 2 years and you go back home. She remembers the smell of when he would open his briefcase and it would smell like Gulf. And if you're ever a Gulf kid, you know what I'm exactly talking about because you have a smell of the Gulf, the perfume, the chocolates and all of that. And she kind of remembers that scent so well. And she kind of wanted to reverse it. And her father used to say that if I could bring back any smell back to Abu Dhabi or back to Dubai, it would be the smell of rain, the smell of the first rain that hits the mud. And petrichor, that's what she distilled. And there was a person in the audience who was in tears because he said, this smells like home to me. And these kind of, I think, conversations is what the Imaginary Museum and RAI is trying to create.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Arnaud, back to you. The Alula art project is one of the most emblematic and ambitious projects to transform Saudi Arabia's cultural landscape. But, we've talked about the lovely stuff. So tell us some of the challenges faced when doing such ginormous projects. And how do you go about building a cultural ecosystem? We know how to build buildings, that we can imagine. But how do you build and create this ecosystem out there?
Absolutely. I think behind all this narrative of building huge cultural project and touristing projects and always putting forwards images and 3D and renderings about infrastructure, we tend to forget how do we actually make this giga project and infrastructure relevant. Infrastructure is a necessity when you build a museum and you need to host a collection, etc. But infrastructure in itself, per se, is void. It's nothing. And building programs, working with the right people, having artists on site, once again, this is intangible infrastructure to me, because the programming can also be considered as some sort of infrastructure. So not everything is about building, although it's necessary. Then it's also about the question, for who are you building and what kind of infrastructure with which purpose? Alula specifically is not a super urban context with millions of people. It's not Riyadh, it's not Jeddah. It's 35,000 people living there, working then throughout the year, and rich tourists that comes to spend 3 days in a very nice hotel. Are we building the museum for them specifically? I'm not sure. So how do a museum or an infrastructure lives the rest of the year? What do you do during summer when it's 50 degrees outside? How do you use this money and leverage infrastructure to make sure that the community, that the inhabitants, the people who works in Alula reappropriates the public realm that was closed until very recently? I'm not sure it answers exactly your question, but I think it's a philosophy and an ethos to have when you're doing something like this. Then the challenges, of course, they're numerous. First of all, time, the acceleration of time in our contemporary society. We are looked upon and we need to create a museum in a several year. We need to do this festival, biennale, so far, so forth. Time is against us. And time is a necessity to work on a good cultural project. For an artist, for example, to work on a good commission for public art, for land art, for a piece that is worth acquiring for the collection, you need to have a proper research. You need to have to unpack the complexity of the place, to meet its people. You cannot go this in a year. So time, the necessity to go fast versus a slow-paced necessity of curation and to listen to the quiet pulse of the land. Then, and I don't think it's specific to Saudi, but this is something I've experienced myself, which I think is a big, big issue to look at for the arts and creative industry world, especially in the Middle East. Outsourcing everything. And once again, I think this is something very important when you do huge project like this, because you need to build museum, you need to build a land art piece by carving 2 mountains. So you need people, and you're going to go through contractors that are mostly international contractors, because you don't have the time then to focus on developing your own production capacity in the land, which is a problem, because then you do it, you have to produce, you have another event. So this is something for me that we really need to look at. Then everything in Saudi right now, and it's a good thing, has been state-founded with massive influx of money from the government to develop an ecosystem. Now we need to balance. We also need to make sure we develop the right context for more grassroots, smaller initiatives, private initiatives to develop on the side of governmental activities, because this is the only way this entire thing will be sustainable in the future. Also, money is there, but for how long? So you need to diversify.
Well, thank you for that. Sasha, looking ahead, 5 years ahead, what new forms of curatorial exchange or creative networks do you think will matter most in sustaining this transnational artistic practice between South Asia and the Gulf region?
I had a quick question here. You really think you're going to run out of funds?
No, I don't think run out of funds, but when everything comes from only one pocket, it's never a sustainable ecosystem. And in order to have virality,
I agree. I face that with a non-profit organization myself, because the funding is only from a body and we're constantly looking for funds ourselves. So I understand. But that's one of the things that I realized when I moved to UAE. You'll have so much money. I mean, compared to what we have to keep struggling and finding something.
You'll give us some now when you're all on the panel.
He's the man.
I know.
This is the law.
That's why they're on the panel, I'm just saying. Great.
That in terms of your question, I am using my cheat note.
I know you're Lola.
Yeah. So I really think the answer is in a long-term collaboration, and where we have to create emphasis on shared archives, co-curated programs, which are regionally anchored in research initiatives. So I really think we have to think larger in a sense of an ecosystem where we and I mean you, me, all of us come together, and we think critically. Yes. No, I mean, even as institutions, right, as museums, we all need to not be individual initiatives, but something that we can collaborate and work together. I think what Ishara Foundation is doing right now is, we're actually doing Ishara House in Kochi. Riaz, who's in the audience, is actually the curatorial director there. And the idea was to take Ishara beyond Dubai. Idea was to create initiatives and a space where discourse could happen. And that comes with research, that comes with the archive that Riaz brings across with us. In terms of, I thought this was poetic and I want to put this in. The way I understand change in 5 years, I would think the corridor between South Asia and the Gulf feels less than a route or a corridor, but more like a shared studio. I would like to think of it as a shared studio where we work towards a collective imagination together, with empathy, with creativity, with ethos. I mean, we kind of build and not independently, but together.
Wonderful. And Ishara House will be the Bullabai.
It may not be the Bullabai, but I think we need to create Bullabai.
Right.
We really need a lot more of those spaces where, and I think one of the nicest things that they said about that generation was it was not about egos and it was not about who am I. It was about a we. There was a collective.
Oh, another thought. He'll host you all in the desert for our brainstorm.
I would love that. I think you really need to.
I'm just going to move on to Rajiv because in the interest of time, I want to open it up to a few questions. Looking at museums, right? Now, we had the Grand Egyptian Museum open last month to much gala. We had the International Museum Expo in Delhi, and Emmanuel Rabate spoke. There's a MOU between our government and the Louvre for the building of the Yug Yugi in Bharat, our mega, world's largest museum to come up. France has expertise. In fact, Mrs. Nadar yesterday mentioned they are using a French company's expertise for her new museum. So what models of museum-to-museum collaborations have been successful from a Louvre perspective and also from your Qatar museum to effectively build institutional capacity and curatorial excellence?
In that regard, we're very much into this ambassador loan program. It's this, it's like soft power, it's diplomacy. It's anywhere the UAE is anyway looking to build in terms of trade or exchanges beyond just the typical axis of the Middle East and the West. So looking to Mexico, it's incredible. We have a 6-ton Olmec head that is now on view in our main lobby. And even to the Philippines, there, national treasures that wouldn't otherwise ever leave their borders are shown at.
Besides from not artifacts and pieces of art, but more from a strategy, because what Louvre Abu Dhabi is doing, or I don't know if it's Abu Dhabi or the France one, but they are advising our government on this new mega project as an intellectual institutional partner. And I think that's where it's interesting to see that how we can, sitting here, I mean, it's in Delhi, but can benefit from the best practices of some of the finest museums in the world.
This is where it's sort of, where Arnaud was speaking to before. There is this cultural agency, France Museums. So we also are working with them as a conduit to the French museum network and the state collections. But it's very much this agency that has the consultancy contractor experience to do everything from museography to, in the trenches, the logistics and the shipping and the design and build and so on. So it's very much a package deal.
Thank you for that. Since Kochi was mentioned, and that Kochi should be mentioned, the Kochi Munis Biennale is 2025-26 is around the corner. You have a family connection with that space. You've been a regular collaborator. So tell us about Like Gold, your upcoming collaboration with Kochi. And before that, this is a question which I think is quite interesting, is how do you see the role and importance of a Biennale like Kochi, particularly today, in fostering these cross-cultural collaboration exchanges in the Global South?
I wanna start off by actually talking about cultural agency, because obviously you have mentioned it, and I'm very conscious this might be the last question within this before we open up. In the Middle East, we were very blessed with incredible visionary leaders who think about cultural agency, and we have names like Louvre and Guggenheim and Frieze and Art Basel and all of these biennales and triennales, and I think Qatar just announced a quadriennale, and all of these things that are coming to provide cultural agency to it. And the question of how do you still appropriate the best practices of all of these cultural agencies, but still be rooted within the context of where you are and service to the people that you are calling audience is a very hard task. And I think someone who runs private institutions, like I think me and Sasha, can absolutely empathize, and I don't envy you guys on how to do that. How do you talk to the audience that you're trying to without I think in that sense, selling out to these names, it's a tough task in that sense. But also, I think coming back to Kuchi Biennale, I'm really excited because I think, like Sasha said, biennales are really the experimentation of these incredible artists where you see where they're going and what they're trying to create. So when the conversation with Murtaza Wali, who's the curator of Like Gold, came, and I was telling him that there is such an incredible economic and social connection between these two regions, India and the UAE, and politically there's such a strong relationship with Modi coming multiple times to Abu Dhabi and having these incredible conversations. How do you kind of artistically and culturally put them in conversation with each other? It's not many times that you see the Emirati artists in conversation with the Indian artists, and I wanted to kind of create this moment of conversation. Clearly, like this something
that granted it.
I know. So, how do you create this moment of conversation? And he said, oh, there's this thing that I've been thinking about, really, this material, which is gold. And it's such an incredible material considering where gold prices are now at the moment in time, but also the economic relationship with gold and the cultural relationship with gold of these two countries, the Emirates and India, and the social importance of it, the material importance of it, the aesthetic importance of it. And he wanted to kind of put that in conversation. So we have some incredible artists, both from India and the Emirates, going to show at Like Gold. I think a collateral opens on the 14th of December, which I'm extremely excited about. And you're all welcome to come and say hi and see it. And I really want to add a few things in the sense of talking about cultural corridors and how things like the Biennale and Ra in essence, supports the growth of the artists. And even though these incredible visionary leaders from these countries spend and policy is extremely important, I think it is really the work of these curators, researchers, artists, and them showing up for each other and keep showing up for each other across borders is what is going to make the ultimate difference. And for us, people like us who do residency programs, we had 680 applications for 4 spaces for our residency program this year in Abu Dhabi from across the world, many of them from India. For us, success, I think, looks like if 4 years down the line, these artists are still talking to collaborators that they work with in Abu Dhabi, if they are still showing up in shows in Abu Dhabi, even 4 years or 5 years later, that for us is success.
That's that literally is my next question to all of you. So now you're not getting that, but talking about gold, I saw with the Qatar Museum open, there was an analogy used with pearls. Mirror did a film, there was that lovely pearl carpet, and looking at the history and the trajectory between the two countries rolled through pearl diving and pearl trade. Arnaud, I'm just picking up on what Shafeena said. What does success look like in 2030 for these cultural corridors? I mean, I'm not lying. That is my next question, which I didn't give you all, so you're going to be stumped.
I'll keep it shorter this time.
For me, success in 2030 means we have infrastructure ready, infrastructure with great contents, a collection that is relevant. And for Alula, as we're not a museum in the city acquiring on the art market, it also means having a unique collection that no one can see anywhere else in any institution, that is mostly composed of commissioned artwork of artists who have spent time in Alula, in the terrain, with the people, with the community. So not something you can see somewhere else in another city. And to look back on what you said on your introduction of the global map of art shifting and new realities, new balance, this is true. This conversation makes us understand that we no longer live in the same world. There's new discourses, new contents, new infrastructure building in parts of the world that were usually considered by this Western world as periphery is no longer the case. Where will it go? And how do we make it sustainable? By also looking at stuff that are a little less glossy, that's so important, like building infrastructure for arts education, for art production, so that we start outsourcing, etc. And finally, for Adola specifically, I think in 2030, if we have pieces of land art in the canyon that we call Wadi Al Fan, I would be very happy. Not just about the land art's name and American names, but artists that are unexpected. It will serve their career, and pieces that are not necessarily gigantic, but relevant, working with the nature rather than against it.
Right. Thank you for that. Sasha, some closing words of wisdom. Well, then we're going to open it up to audience questions, so I can't do that after. Or I can do a rapid fire, whichever you prefer.
Rapid fire.
Really? Okay, one word that describes the future of cultural corridors. Quick, it's rapid.
Living frameworks.
Okay. I'll give you one more. One word that defines soft power in art.
Gosh, this is tough.
You asked for rapid fire. Okay.
Okay, can I get a question?
You had your chance. Any parting comments?
No, I just hope that we can actually open more critical spaces for discourse, where whether it's a museum, whether it's Ishara Art Foundation and institutions like us, that we kind of actually come together collectively.
And avid learning, you know.
And avid learning, yes.
To my
Oh, as you know, can I also do it for Ishara House, please? We open on the 13th of December. Please, please, please come.
All right. Rajiv, closing thoughts, or you want a rapid fire?
Closing thoughts. So I guess I just want to end, I think there's this perception in the region that it's a cultural arms race. Qatar announces, they're doing Basel, where Abu Dhabi's doing Freeze. But I would like to, and even within Sadia Cultural District, amongst us institutions, the museums on the island, I would rather take the attitude of and I really love this expression, of a rising tide lifts all boats. So I really do think there's that growing sense in the region.
Thank you for that. We should take how many audience questions? 2. Oh, Chintan, your hand was up. Hi.
Hi, my name is Chintan. Sasha, you mentioned critical spaces of discourse. I'm going to take off from that and ask you, what is the space in these cultural corridors to talk about Palestine, and what does funding look like after the genocide has happened? Because coming to Middle East panel and not hearing about Gaza seems like a total failure. At least as someone who writes about the arts and care about the arts, we talk of empathy, critique, etc., but not a word about Palestine. It's such a disgrace.
I sincerely apologize, but like I said, I'm amongst this panel. I'm the newbie on the block.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you. I think we do need to address it.
They also represent institutions, so there's another whole level. Another question that's about art. Yeah, Mini.
Can I?
Oh, I think you're just going to
Can I
take 2.
answer Chintan's question? Or just a thing, this brings in the role of censorship.
Yeah, I know.
And I think that's a very important part in my discourse, because I do find it very problematic when you're working within UAE and how difficult it is, because you're censored at every given level. Because it's whether I use a word politically, and I have to kind of see what the implications are. I cannot talk about sexuality at all, because there are other ramifications to it.
Now this barrel's taking off.
Yeah, so it's so I do understand, but we're all kind of tied up, and we cannot take our political stands. And I'm a red diaper child, so it's very difficult for me to not have an opinion, and yet I'm supposed to hold back.
As the only one from a private institution who runs and owns it, I can totally talk. I constantly show Palestine, and we have a Palestinian artist showing right now who has a blood red work going on, which kind of, I think, talks about the blood from the families that she's lost in Palestine. This is something that we actually constantly talk about in the gallery that I own and operate in, because we are one of those spaces, our safe spaces, that we are allowed and can talk about. Because I think in some ways we're under the radar, and we don't actually, we're not owned by a government institution, and we are allowed to allow artists to take any and all political stance they can. This is a conversation that I think artists themselves want to take, but that is not something we impose on the artist as well to take or not to take a stand. It is up to his or her, I think, artistic expression in that sense. So this is what it is.
Just quickly. So of course, to talk about this topic, we need another panel. It was also very tricky because right now we're trying to cover essentially the dynamic of the artworks, talking about infrastructure and project and not programming per se, which is another talk. It doesn't mean that we cannot talk about it. Of course we can. And just like you, I mean, I'm working for a governmental body, but I host and encourage to have a lot of artists who have a critical point of view of this. And we're not censoring them. We're just accompanying them as curator, because this is also our role to challenge this authority is in censorship discourse to go into the right direction. And as I said, very largely at the beginning, that it's also our responsibility to invite artists with their critical eye and critical discourse that will pass on this very critical message that the organization in itself cannot put in a press release, for example. So it's another discussion, but I don't think it was the center of it. So I wouldn't say it's a disgrace per se. It's just that it's another topic that I would be happy to spend another hour just to talk right now.
Next, Art Mumbai. Just quickly, we need to wrap.
My question is to Arnaud and Sasha. Both of you said that the primary source of your funds is from one family or one institution. In this scenario, where do you see the new patrons coming in? How do you kind of evolve them and guide them? Do you have any plans to, groom them or anything?
Okay, so quickly, so yeah, for Alula, the money is coming from the government because it's a project led by the Royal Commission of Alula, which is in itself an emanation of Ministry of Culture. Right now, it's going on. They're developing. Money is there. I'm not saying this because we need sponsors right now because we lack money. I'm saying it because it is a sustainable way to have diversity. Which is so important. And for example, if you host a private institution like Saint Pompidou or any other government, and they're just coming, they're taking the money, they don't invest a bit, they're not taking any risk. For me, the relation is unbalanced, and then the discourse is just not good and into one direction. Then they're looking for sponsors and etc. That's another topic that is less interesting, but I was more talking in terms of cooperation when you work with an international museum or etc. There needs to be a real partnership, some sort of investment together.
Sasha, anything to add? Or
we're a non-profit organization, so it basically comes from our founder chairperson. She puts in an X amount, and then for the rest of the exhibition, depending on how ambitious the exhibition is, we seek partnerships and alliances with other institutions or private funders, collectors, invariably logistical support from galleries and shipping, for example. So that's how we kind of built the narrative. Otherwise, it's extremely difficult to sustain to do exhibitions stemming from just one source.
But I want to ask Shafeena to get, because she's the only cultural institute to be a certified social enterprise. So you care to comment on, you invite in other partners?
In the sense, like, I'm very aware of how social foundations are run. Like Sasha said, it's one single source, right? And it becomes extremely difficult when it's one single source. As we see in the UK with the Art Council cutting funding, you're like, there's so many incredible initiatives that are, shutting down or closing down. I didn't want that. So I actually, my third master's is in social enterprises from the University of Cambridge. So I actually studied how to do social enterprise before I actually started one. And for me, where there is a gallery space, we do sell artwork as in any gallery does, but that all the money from the sales or any other thing that the gallery does actually goes into our residency program, non-commercial shows that we do. Last year we did an incredible all sound art show, which no one's ever going to buy, but it was culturally relevant at that point, and it was about it was called Listening for Traces, and it was about sound from conflict areas and wars, and we thought that was an important conversation to have at that point in time. And this is exactly what we do.
Wonderful. Just last question to the lady. She's been putting her hand up.
Thanks so much, Asad. My name is Priyanka, and I'm a 90s Gulf kid as well. So a lot of the things that you said on the panel really resonated with me. I have the privilege of working with the KNMA marketing team in the sense that we're building a museum for the future, as all of you are aware. And Keto mentioned a lot of statistics that spoke about, the shifting power of access. And as someone who's looking to build a community of museum goers, I'm very curious to understand, particularly since I was at the Immersive in Doha 2 weeks ago as well. What is the single most important objective for all of you who are building these cultural institutions in the Middle East, particularly when we're talking about rules of art engagement, with retaining and building a community of artists or community of museum goers? What is the important thing that you're trying to build there?
I think he's kind of covered part of it, but many of them have. Anybody wants to just give one or two comments? That's a great, and y'all are doing some amazing work. And I was sitting here yesterday with Keto, and I added the statistics and the new information, especially about the Shergill film, to my notes. Anybody want to comment on this, or you think we've...
I think it's about the voices that you don't otherwise hear because, it's all marketing or hype or just this framework as, coming from the West or, it's dogma. And breaking away from that and creating new conversations, new spaces for exchange that, can happen amongst ourselves or with the rest of the region here and not necessarily.
I may be the outsider, but I'm going to answer. It's all about education. You start educating the kids young, which they're doing. You start educating people. You do talks like what we do. You create a sense of learning. I know people are distracted. There are 100 million things to do these days. Going to a museum should be something that you want to do, and there should be something compelling to do. And there is a museum-going culture in many other parts of the world. I mean, I think India and Delhi, you do have now so many new opportunities with so many new private museums coming on, and it's fantastic. I think and this is where you'll get, and I bear another hat with Fiki, with cultural tourism, and that's what the whole thing is about. But thank you so much for those questions. I'm going to do my quick wrap up. What we've heard today is the cultural corridors are moving from Dubai to Doha, Riyadh to Kochi. They aren't following the old playbook. They're rewriting it. The shift is clear from spectacle to substance. Rather than importing culture, they're producing it. They're connecting. Cities are being connected, linking art with economy and heritage with innovation. The challenge now is to keep this impact lasting. Thank you to our panelists and everyone for being here and to help redefine the geography of culture. Thank you very much.